So, welcome. My name is Ela Kagel. I'm co-founder of this place, of SUPERMARKT. SUPERMARKT is both, as you see, is a community space, is a workspace where a collective of people is working together on topics such as money, society, technology. These are the interests that brought us together 8 years ago. And I would say, on the one hand, a deep interest in all things digital, but also at the same time the question, how does this play out in the realm of our social lives? So this is something we constantly try to focus on and try to understand. And we run workshops, we organize conferences, events, we do research and also consultancy work around these topics. So tonight, Joel Zentemeyer is here. He's at the very back. He's monitoring the tech. He's co-founder of SUPERMARKT. And then we have Thomas Dönnebrink here. Thomas is a very important collaborator here at SUPERMARKT because we are running basically almost all the program together. Over the past couple of years, we've developed a deep interest in not only digital topics or the question of society, but we also realized that, in the midst of all the crises we are living in, we are also living in some sort of a organizational crisis, I would say. And I don't know how many of you experience this feeling that there is a certain type of organization that you might need for your ideas, for, the stuff that you're working on, but then you discover it's not out there. So what we've been looking over the past couple of years was the platform cooperativism movement as a potential form of organizing people around a specific cause, of creating shared ownership, democratic control, and new forms of governance. And it was through this link that we got to know the people of RChain. So that's basically the reason that brought us together tonight. So RChain, as probably you all know, is a technology cooperative. It's based in Seattle. And they are currently building a blockchain solution. And tonight we are not here to entirely focus on the tech aspects of things, even though we have a call later on with Greg Meredith and also Steve Ross Talbot. He's the chairperson of RChain Europe. And Greg is the founder of RChain, and he's the president of the US co-op. So they will both talk about technology. They will be able to answer all your questions around the row calculus and Rowlang, and you can meet them later via Zoom at 9 p.m. But the question that brought us here primarily was the question of how can we organize people to do stuff together in a meaningful, sustainable way. And that's what I would call governance, but we hear many more definitions and propositions of what governance actually means, and especially governance in the digital world, especially governance in the blockchain sphere. So I'm very happy, and it's probably not a coincidence that we are discussing that now, because many of you who have followed the latest development of RChain Cooperative in the US might have noticed that there is a lot going on. It's not only that the token plunged and that there's a certain economic crisis going on within the co-op, but it's also that I think the co-op is now at a state where it realized that it really needs to adopt a different model of governance and to redefine the governance models that have been in place so far. So this is really, it's a critical moment in time, but it's a chance to mature, and it's a chance to really learn and move forward. And this is also, I think the same applies for us. So RChain Europe was also founded as a sister cooperative with the goal of contributing research around distributed governance, identity solutions, and also I would say all this knowledge around organizational forms. So this is how we try to establish a collaboration, but also at the same time we need to reorientate ourselves and find our identity of how we want to move on as a co-op. So that's basically the framing of tonight. And we thought, instead of simply focusing on the technology and what it can do, and I personally still believe in this technology because I think it's fantastic, it's full of options. But tonight we want to focus on governance and what it actually means. And we hear different contributions from people that are doing research, that are working with governance. And I think there will be a lot of, insights around that. So we have agreed to structure the evening in such a way that we have around 1 hour now, and we will hear 8 short talks, each of them 5 minutes. I know it's very brief, and everyone who is going to talk tonight has far more to say than just 5 minutes, believe me, so they could easily talk the entire evening. But we deliberately thought it would be great to really restrict speaking time, because I think first and foremost you want to talk to each other, and you want to make sure that after those 8 talks you can find the right person and you can get deeper into the conversation with the people in which projects you're interested in. So therefore that's the suggestion. We will start with 8 impulse talks, 5 minutes each, and I would kindly ask you, if you have any questions, there will be plenty of time to approach the people afterwards, ask your questions, because it might even be that a question comes up with in one speech, and it might even be answered by another speaker. It might also be that more questions will be added to that, but I would kindly ask you to save your questions and then save it for later on, because we will have a break with snacks and drinks, and then we can break out in different groups and make sure that those people that really want to go together and talk together have the chance of meeting up and talking to each other. So this meeting is live streamed, and I also want to welcome everyone in the live stream. I want to welcome our friends in the US and also in the UK and wherever they are, maybe also from RChain Asia, wherever they are watching us. And I just hope we have a very inspiring and interesting evening, and above all, a very communicative one. So thanks again for coming along. And as a next speaker, I kindly want to ask Andreas Arnold to join me. Now, what's going on? The pointer is not working. Now it does. Very good. So Andreas is working with us in the team of RChain Europe. I know him since many years. We've also worked in the previous SUPERMARKT, and Andreas has a deep interest in, I think first of all, where he started off was the sharing economy. Then he moved further into the field of collaborative economy. He became a WeShare connector, and he's really one of these people that have a fantastic understanding of how communities work. And he's I would say he is really an advocate for community work. And over the past weeks, he spent a lot of time to really dig deep into the ecosystem of decentralized governance. So, Andreas, give us an overview of where you stand, please.
Yeah, thanks, Ela. And also a warm welcome to you guys. I'm really excited to see so many people interested in governance, and particularly in the decentralized governance. But at the same time, it makes me wonder, who of you has actually an idea or an understanding of what decentralized governance means? Maybe you can raise your hand. All right, so that's like maybe 1/3 of the crowd, and I suppose there's some people working in that field as well? It's fewer, okay. Besides the speakers, I don't see so many. All right, so it's then probably the same base like I started off when I joined RChain in August this year. I had pretty much no clue, and the first thing I did, I was looking it up on Google, and the very first entry was from the UNDP, describing it as decentralization refers to the restructuring of authority so that there's a system of co-responsibility between institutions and governance. So if I look at your faces, I remember how I must have looked like, because it didn't help much, and I researched a bit further, and mostly blockchain stuff came up, and I'm not a programmer. That didn't help either. So I started kind of from nothing, and in the last couple of weeks I then developed an understanding, my own definition, which is kind of a work in progress, and maybe later on we can talk a little bit about your idea of this. But my one is now decentralized governance is a practical approach to manage organizations in an unhierarchical, non-location-based and mass-adoptable way, which represents people directly in the decisions. And by organizations, I don't only mean in the political domain, but in any kind of gathering where people come together. It can be companies, it can be non-governmental organizations, and so on. And why does this matter? Well, I guess all of you witnessed that the world is somehow falling apart. I mean, people, they don't really trust in their political systems anymore, and then follow loud and destructive leaders. And also the companies, they rather foster and work for the shareholder values instead of for the customers, for the people behind, and of course not for the environment. And another reason, I mean, Ela mentioned, RChain is also established as a co-op. We needed to come up with our own governance processes. So that was quite a problem, as we even see nowadays, to deal with our own working structures. And eventually, a couple of weeks ago, there was one VC at the Web3 Summit who said that decentralized governance might just be one of the killer apps for blockchain, and that he thinks that it's at least in the top 5 of all the use cases blockchain can sustain. So what do we actually do within RChain? We started a series, a call series called Expression of Wish, and there we come up with user stories for different external stakeholders, which could also become potential clients. For example, we now prepare a proposal for the British Labour Party around Jeremy Corbyn, and they actually want to live up to a digital democracy and one day have the national budget done in a participative manner. So within our talks now we are trying to elaborate on an experiment where all the 65,000 Labour Party members will actually learn the benefits, the challenges and the potential of such decentralized governance tools like this co-budget, what I draw on the side. So basically, we will have the entire budget split to the different members in the party, whereas they can put their the share what they see appropriate to the different funds like health or education, social protection, and so on. So yeah, this is a kind of what we started with, but I must also admit that it was quite a struggle to get there, because as I mentioned, we had our own problems to deal with. Since we are living and working in different time zones, there's people in the US, in the UK, and here in Germany. We all also had a different understanding how to run those calls and how to come up with decision making, how to go on to the different directions. And also documentation was a problem. So very simple, we sat down and came up with a protocol, an agenda, which now guides us through the calls. It's kind of starting with the meeting settings, where you have the topic, the people who are in this call. Of course, there's the Zoom link and such things which are just required to run the call. But then there's also the matters from the last session, where we kind of like talk about all the to-dos that had been done from all the responsible people. Then we move into the agenda for this call, talking about new stuff, and eventually we summarize. That kind of protocol refers to the documents where the actual work is stored, so everybody can easily find, wow, I heard some sound, where everybody can find the documents behind, and there's some timekeeping, which is obviously very important. So I jumped to to my last slide actually, which was really fun to do. We conducted a mapping of the decentralized governance ecosystem, where we found that there's approximately 60 tool providers. Some of them are here in the room, and we will listen to their presentations. So here you see 4 of the main fields. It's identity, where we work with LifeID, which is an RChain portfolio company, meaning being already in our ecosystem and working closely together, deploying their solution on the mainnet later, next year. There's a bunch of decision-making tools, where I would like to emphasize Apollos, which is very cool to know what your organization thinks. We could probably talk about this a little bit later. And there's co-budget tools, and the collective one is a representative of a governance system, which actually has components of the different subsystems from before. Okay, that's it already. Let me know if you want to be involved in those calls. Drop me a mail. I would like to include you in the call sessions and also elaborate on the outcomes of the mapping. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Andreas. Yeah, that's of course, this is just a teaser because Andreas has much more to add. I want to welcome Pepo. Pepo is, he took the travel from Barcelona. He arrived last night. And I know that Pepo is really looking forward to meet many people that are working in governance, meet as many people as possible working here locally. And also Pepo has a lot to talk about what's going on in Barcelona, what's going on in the field of self-organization, governance, and so forth. And I'm super, super happy that you managed to join us to talk about collective fund, but also about your own notion of governance. Thanks, Pepo.
Thank you, Ela, and good evening, everybody. So, because there is a short amount of time, I decided to focus my presentation on sharing an idea, not so much about presenting Collective One. So Collective One is a platform to develop, to create and manage open projects, and these projects need governance. Okay, so the basic idea that I want to share with you is that for us now, we want to frame the problem of governance not as a voting problem, but as a communication problem. Okay, so we'll start with a simple statement that is probably highly controversial here, is that organizations must be hierarchical, and maybe other things like markets might not be hierarchical, but organizations, as we know them, and yeah, they need to be hierarchical. So they don't need to be a hierarchy of people, but they need some sort of hierarchy of domains. And to prove this, or as an example, I would argue that the mural on the left, it's painted by many people, and it doesn't need hierarchy. But the mural on the right, if it's drawn by multiple people, it needs some sort of hierarchy to be effectively to reach to that result that has some commonality. So how a standard organization hierarchy works? It's basically a hierarchy of people. That's 100% of the organizations in this world are a hierarchy of people. And you start from the left to the right with like higher levels have a large scope, and they make a few decisions that have a big impact. And so decisions are the blue arrows, and as you move to the right, you get decisions with lower scope, but a higher number of decisions. And then each brain in this hierarchy of people it takes care of all these complex analyses that need to be done to take effective decisions. And then what happens is that this is planned on what everybody has in their mind. It's not the real world. And as soon as you start, like the lower level, start implementing stuff, the new information starts to arrive, and the organizations needs to adapt. So this information needs to flow back upwards, and it gets filtered based on how general it is, so that each member of the hierarchy can update its own mental mindset and take new decisions based on that. So this is how a real organization looks like. So there's a mess, sorry for the word, of information and decisions flowing, and of this mess only human minds are able to make sense of it. So it's important that it's fundamented on the power of human brains. It's an important thing to take into account, because if you want to go to, okay, so now let's think, this is not what we want. We want something different. That's clear. So instead of looking for non-hierarchical organizations, let's focus on participative organizations, which I think is different. So the first step for a participative organization we know about is democracy, or at least democracy as we know them, which is one single decision with the largest scope is taken collectively, which is to appoint a leader. All other decisions and everything else is business as usual, a hierarchy of people. Okay? So this is as far as we have been able to arrive in terms of participative organizations. And because of this, participativeness is based on some principles that are, the more people participate on the decision, the better. The power of influence of each person should be the same, and the chance of each voter of being right is considered to be the same. So these are like the principles of collective participation right now. So what happens if an organization wants to give the next step? They usually think about this. Let's remove the CEO. So I would argue that's not a good idea. From my own experience, that's a bad idea, basically because you get rid of the CEO brain. And then what you do is you create a committee of the department managers that would have to replace all the associations made by the CEO brain through meetings and human-to-human communication, which is not as effective as synapses. And so you end up with wanting the CEO back very soon, in my own experience. So taking into account this, I propose to change a little bit the principles that guide participativeness to this one. So the fewer people that influence a decision, the better, as soon as everybody has the opportunity to influence that decision. And well, I don't want to go a lot into the others, but the third one is important. So participation should move away from counting votes and should be about communicating and sharing context. So these contexts are what you know, the mental image you have about the problem. And yeah, I will skip this. So participation in an organization starts from the individual. It doesn't start from, let's take a decision, all of us. It starts from the CEO. And the first thing that he or she has to do is to start communicating his or her context. So all the ideas he has in some sort of way that is accessible to others. So it's a matter of getting your own mind context into what we are calling virtual contexts. And so the organization, which remains hierarchical, creates these virtual contexts in which each member can communicate their own information to others, so that others at least have access to it. And they don't have to vote on everything at all levels, but at least they can see it. So the ultimate participative organization would remain hierarchical, but it would be a hierarchy of virtual contexts in which different people decide to participate, but it's not that you have to all participate on all of them, but they can specialize on some of them. And this is what this communication tool is, what we are trying to build in Collective One, and we are calling it like a Git, but for ideas and conversations, because it needs to be relatively powerful, and we are exploring different solutions. And that's it. I think it's time. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Pepo. And one of the things that these are still, okay. So one of the things that a lot of people associate with governance is the notion of value accounting, and is this question of, okay, we are working together in a group, so how much is everyone contributing and how much value is everyone giving into the group? And I know it's also a topic that Pepo is working very strongly on, so we thought it might be a great idea to have Anna Blume next from Value Instrument, a very interesting project that seeks at stimulating economic activities within communities. And Anna is a person that is widely known, not only in Berlin, but I would say all over Europe. She's a real community person working with many different startups, with communities of practice, and trying to get her knowledge in all those different fields. And I'm really glad that you could come tonight. So welcome, Anna.
Yeah, thank you, Ela. Hi, all. Yes, my first presentation on Value Instrument. Normally, we just show our demo and play with the people directly. So can I use this one? Yeah, Value Instrument. It's a tool to create a tailored complementary currency for communities. So it's kind of like of a white label app. We don't have a logotype yet or design. We just did the app. It's on. You can try it. Its implementation is on, and the link is reubi.app if you want to. We actually came to this because we wanted to implement a demurrage token, and then we started also with the implementation, and then more and more questions came up. So, and actually there were more questions and more we have no idea about. Yeah, we are at the same point as RChain, maybe somehow. So important for us now, together with communities. We are already working with communities and try to do different implementations. So we are using in the back end a MongoDB or Ethereum test network, so we can do different implementations in the back end as well in the front end. And people can choose, for example, for a payout, like a UBI for their community, they can choose on how many transaction fees, what is the lifetime of a token, and so on. And yeah, for communities, and learn on speed. It's super important to act in real time. So going from mapping to real-time navigation. So it's not a set of rules you can't change. So for a community to learn, it's super important to go on speed. And also that will foster the meaning making. So you need meaning in the community for what is it good and how to use it, or if it's not working, you want to have a different. So it's also important to have data to feel the weak signals in the community, to change, and not in the end if something is really broken. And yeah, if you have different implementations, maybe also from other communities, you should be able to implement this innovation in real time. And also the data should give you a ping of difficult situations or opportunities as well. And yeah, we are a living system. And of course, we need to focus on the future of ethics at first also, and link it to the emerging technology. So there should be a deep dialogue all the time with all stakeholders. And yeah, for us, it's motherhood, caring about communities, really caring about meaning, and yeah, doing it in the real life, yeah, in the cities, in the villages, in between, and also talk to each other and using technology. Yeah, any questions? I have some more time, or do we do this later?
Yeah, actually we intended to ask questions later.
Yeah. Okay. Then I'm.
Thanks, Anna.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot. Normally we would have Joachim from YOLO come now, but he's sick, and so is most of his team. So unfortunately he won't be able to join us. But I suggest we move on. Right on to Stacco and Anne-Marie from both Guerrilla Translation and Peer-to-Peer Foundation. I have met you both first in the digital realm, I would say, through connections with Thomas and others. And we've hosted a Commons Poly board game lately here at SUPERMARKT. We've met several times. And I know a little bit about the governance model you want to propose with Guerrilla Translation. And yeah, I'm just very curious to hear more from you. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm Anne-Marie, this is Stacco, and we're from Guerrilla Translation and P2P Foundation.
Extremely bad luck with.
Oh, here we are.
So very briefly about Guerrilla Translation in particular, for which we've been working very intensely for the past few months on a governance model. The history of Guerrilla Translation was that we began as activist translators, and we wanted to share information in other languages and cultures. And we started with our own language pair, which was Spanish and English. And we quickly began to realize that there was just a lot of opportunity to find articles, to translate, which we did voluntarily as just a small collective. We attracted some people and continued. And we also found that there were opportunities for paid work. So with how Ela started this, there was an opportunity for meaning, but also for sustainability. We saw this rich combination of being able to do pro bono and paid work. But as Anna was just saying, we didn't know what we didn't know. It's not so easy to make work in a collective without governance. And we had an idea of what that might mean. We put some blogs together. We calculated what we needed for word count. And we tried our best, but what we weren't really good at is team building and team maintenance, the care of keeping people together, keeping people motivated. And we succeeded and failed a lot of times before we recognized that we needed help with the governance model that we were trying to adapt for years. And so this year, in May, in our sunny village of Western Spain, we convened a meeting with some invited stakeholders to be consultants or experts to help inform our decision making about how to adapt a governance model to our needs. I'll invite you to talk a little bit more about that.
Okay. So the fastest way to think of the governance model is like shares. Imagine that it's shares in an enterprise, but you're in a co-op, and you cash out at the end of each month. So we track value, and we track 3 kinds of value. Lights out, here we are, fun. Okay. So basically we have pro bono work, which is translations that we choose to do. We have social and environmental value, and we also have agency work. But when we do the pro bono translation, this is based on word count, which is something that is really easy to tokenize. So we have our ledger, we write down the word count, and then we do some paid translation, which is also based on words. When we get paid, 75% of what we get as income goes to fulfill what we call the livelihood credits, which are the agency shares, and 25% goes to fill the love credits, which are the pro bono shares. And yeah, I'm not getting the hang of it, is it? Okay. But that's not the only thing, because what we're talking about so far is productive value, but we also wanted to talk about reproductive value. So we also track care work. But care work is not tracked by words, but by hours. And when you track hours, you want to make sure that there's a high level of trust. So we make sure we have a 9-month dating phase, we call it, where we incorporate people until we reach a certain level of intimacy. And the team is humming. And just quickly on governance, I mean, normally governance in a commons is a dialectic between culture and structure. And often in distributed ledger projects, you see a lot of attention being paid to the structure, but not so much to the culture. So we try to put a lot of emphasis on care work, emphasis on feminist economics, which is very much absent, again, from this space. And okay, so that's more about this. So how do you replicate this on-chain? So most people will take, okay, make a DAO. So this is decentralized autonomous organization. But we have a problem with that. First of all, decentralization usually implies that there's a center that then it's kind of like weaned off. But there's always invisible hierarchies that remain that we do not like. Autonomous, if you're going to put something on a system that cannot be taken down and is distributed, maybe you don't want fully autonomous systems, especially combined with AI. So we thought, okay, what can we do? How can we codify these value metrics to make something that it's bigger? Not necessarily scaled up, we also have a critique about that, but federated and distributed. So we came up with this. Okay, so these are not our slides, it's a bit baffling, okay? So this is the distributed cooperative organization, but because you cannot pronounce that, we made it DISCO, distributed cooperative organization. So distributed means many holonic nested nodes where you can keep this kind of like face-to-face intimacy. And cooperative, because we need more co-ops. And one of the things of the cooperative movement, co-ops worldwide have the same market cap, which is over 3 trillion, as Microsoft, Apple, Google, Amazon, and Facebook. But they do not follow the 6 cooperative principle, which is cooperating together. We think that with governance models like this, and with this combination of culture and structure, we can have many federated co-ops working together, and not just do economic resistance, which is what we're doing at the small scale, but actually become an economic counterpower.
And a disco.
And a disco.
Thank you.
That's the one. That's the one that
Thanks so much. Thank you. Yeah, I like the notion of disco, and I like that it's fun, right? And it includes movement, and yeah, I think we can all use that. So, thank you, and welcome, Peter. I know people since a couple of years. Our paths crossed when the platform co-op movement was on the rise, and Peter supported a number of events here at SUPERMARKT with his knowledge of blockchain technologies, but also with his vision how to combine blockchain technology and platform co-ops. And he was, I think he was courageous enough to found one and actually build something that many people say it's the anti-model of Spotify. It's a music streaming collective. It's called Resonate. And I think Peter has really had the chance to learn about governance firsthand over the past couple of years. So I think you have, I'm very curious what you're going to share. Thanks so much.
Thank you. And your timing is perfect, because I wouldn't be making this particular presentation tonight if I hadn't heard you speak at Revision a couple of days ago. So the question I'm going to ask, if I can click, and click. There it goes. What's the real movement? What's the thing that's really driving us? What's really connecting us? That's the question I'm asking tonight. We all know about this, the perils of the corporate model, as you just mentioned. That's what, 3 trillion worth of wealth. A lot of us thought that this was going to happen. You know, the whole crypto movement is kind of founded on that. I even heard someone say a couple days ago at Revision that Ethereum itself was founded around the notion that they were going to defeat capitalism. But it didn't quite turn out that way this year. So a friend of mine uses this phrase, post-scarcity means that post-scarcity thinking means you already have what you need. So stop looking for something extra that you need to go get and look at what you already have. And that's led me to think about this list, which, I'm sorry, the type's a little bit small on the screen. I'll read it out for you anyway. We already have institutional co-ops with access to capital, as you mentioned, $3 trillion of collective wealth in the co-op movement. We also have hundreds of small tech service co-ops worldwide. These are operations of 5 to 20 people that are doing tech jobs and run cooperatively. We also have emerging platform co-ops like Resonate, and Felix from Fairmondo is in the second row there. And a number of platform co-ops that are struggling to get formed for various reasons we'll go into. We also have lots of customers and workers in retail and lots of business co-ops worldwide. And as you said, you made the key point there. They're not necessarily following the 6th principle, which is for co-ops to collaborate with other co-ops. And so let's add another step in the middle there. A tokenized, compensated open source system to build co-op applications. This is an idea that I've been working on out of necessity, because while we were funded by RChain earlier in this year, the crypto market crashed, as you saw in that diagram, and we ran out of funds. We didn't get our MVP out, and we're now back into the funding game again. But there's no institutional support for platform co-ops yet. And so as I was working through this whole model, I was really focused a lot on thinking another level up. Thinking about all the things that we would need to get our product out. A lot of them are common. The functionalities are very similar across applications. So if we had an open source model of having modular based applications, and we have a very progressive model of doing compensated open source, and we get funding through the capital coming out of the traditional co-op sector, we might have a way to move forward. Now, something very weird happened with this diagram since I passed it over to you. It was a circle before, so it's turned into a heart, which is kind of a little somewhat deformed. It's kind of poetic. Right, so these are all the steps that I mentioned changed over the name there at the bottom. Think about WordPress. A lot of us have used WordPress. So think about WordPress and it's modular. You can drop a plugin in to do a specific thing. We're going to think about this as the model for building dApps, decentralized applications. Now, what's the thing in the middle there? The People's Passport is a working title for an application that Resonate has been co-developing with Mycelia, which is a music organization out of the UK, founded by Imogen Heap. The Creative Passport to be used for music and the creative industries is a very unique solution in blockchain. It's an identity solution. It's also a profile management solution and a login and gateway solution for artists to be able to move through various music services that are building on blockchain. So we spent quite a bit of our budget that came through RChain this year to put towards the building of the Creative Passport. And right now we're in discussions about the possibility of opening up this model to be used in other kinds of organizations. And this being in the center, it becomes the thing that can connect all of the different services that could get built. The platform co-ops that want to run at a large scale, the small service co-ops that might be a part of building all of the modules out, the commercial co-ops, your local LPG or food grocery store that may want to have a new messaging system and have a new way to digitally engage with their customers. All of them could work through this model that we're exploring with Mycelia on the People's Passport. And that's all I had to say. Wow. Look at that.
Wow. Peter, I'm impressed. This was really perfect timing. What can I say? Thanks so much. And I think, your presentation also reminds me of the fact that sometimes it's also really good if we have these times of crisis maybe in between, because it really forces us to think a little bit deeper about the stuff we are doing. And I feel that's probably also the opportunity that we are currently having. Andreas, can I ask you to help me a little bit, because our next guest is not here physically in the space, but she's with us in spirit, not only today, but I would say since quite a while. So we will be talking to Francesca Pick. Francesca is, I would say, she's an advocate of collaborative finance, of collaborative economies. I got to know her through WeShare. She is, I think, one of the driving forces behind the WeShare Fest. And she's also collaborating with Blume. And now Francesca is very actively involved in an organization that's called Greater Than. And this is all about collaborative finance. And Francesca, I'm super glad that you're with us. Can we all see you? Okay, we're still working on making you visible for everyone. I see you already. Yeah, hopefully we'll get there very soon. But yeah,
Can you
just
hear my voice?
very glad to have you here. Yeah, now here you go. We see you. Welcome.
Hello.
But can we hear you too?
But it seems you can't hear me.
Wait, hold on a second, Francesca.
Yep.
There is. Maybe we get some help. Scholt, maybe. Oh. Yeah, the speakers
Should I
are
say
on.
something?
Francesca, are you muted?
No.
No, because our speakers are connected.
Yeah, I'm definitely not muted.
Here you are. Oh,
Okay, you can hear me?
very well. Thanks.
Okay. This is a very confusing setup because I'm watching the live stream, so I see myself. I don't see you.
Can you turn around to...
No, we changed that setting.
Should I get started?
Yes, please.
Okay, great. So thanks for the introduction, Ella, and I'm happy to be joining even though I'm not physically there, hopefully next time. So as Ela briefly said, for the last few years, I've really been working in a number of different distributed networks and communities. And so the main one that I've been really experimenting in is WeShare. And there's also a second one, which is pretty critical in a lot of the work I'm doing now, which is the Inspiral Network, which was started in New Zealand as a collective of entrepreneurs, and which developed the Lumio application and also the first prototype of this collaborative budgeting software called CoBudget. So overall, the real red thread of what I've been doing for the past few years is really experimenting with lots of new governance models that are more collaborative, participatory, as Pepo nicely highlighted, and really trying to look at the sort of intersection between how technology can support groups do this kind of collaborative governance, but really focusing on the human side of that. And so what's really quite interesting and what I wanted to highlight briefly is an experiment that we did in WeShare a few years ago. This was actually in 2015, I think, which was together with this project called Backfeed. Now I'm going to share my screen very briefly. Let's see if this works. So basically, Backfeed was like the very, very early days of experimenting with decentralized governance through distributed ledgers. And basically, here's just a sort of a screenshot of their old website. It was all about decentralized organizing systems at scale. And so the ask that the founder Matan had come to us with at WeShare was we want a real community to experiment with to actually see how could this kind of system really work in a real context. So I'm not going to go into much more detail on that specific experiment, but I documented it in quite detail. There's 3 articles that I've written that I can also share the links around with, which basically sort of explain the challenges and also the failures of trying to sort of take a very technical system that was trying to distribute power, mainly through documenting transactions and evaluating people's work, and how that really didn't quite connect with the reality of how our group was functioning and our teams were organizing ourselves. But so it was that experience, that experiment that really led me to continue to want to dig deeper into these questions of collaborative governance, and which led me to start working on CoBudget, which Andreas mentioned earlier. And so the basic principle of CoBudget is to enable groups to do sort of a live crowdfunding for different projects, but in a way that enables them to actually make budget decisions in a very collaborative way. And so what's quite interesting to really close this loop, and one of the projects that I wanted to highlight right now that we're working on is actually supporting the next stage of what Backfeed ended up becoming, which is called DAOstack. And so DAOstack is actually built a blockchain version of CoBudget. So it's basically a collaborative budgeting tool for DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations. And what I and my colleagues at Greater Than are really focusing on, or I would say what we're trying to figure out, is how can we actually make the human side of these attempts at doing decentralized budgeting really work. So I'm going to show you another, a live DApp, because I thought that might be fun. I hope that works. So basically what we're doing right now is DAOstack did an IPO a few months ago, and one chunk of their budget, they basically committed to putting into a DAO. And so the genesis out of the DAO is this prototype, or this first DAO basically that we've created together. And DAOstack as an organization is funding this DAO every week. And basically here you can just see the interface of proposals that different people in the community have put up that have been voted on and been passed. And so it's a DApp, so it's extremely slow. It takes, seconds or minutes or sometimes hours to pass transactions. But basically, anyone who goes on here can input a proposal, ask for funds, and then people in the system that have reputation can vote. facilitating the community of early adopters around this DAO. And we're really trying to actually build a real collaborative culture within that group, which is actually quite contrary to some of the original ideas of these kind of systems, because they're made for mass scale, and people maybe don't know each other, and it's anonymous, and you don't know who's actually making proposals. But so we're actually trying to take a lot of our knowledge from how we've seen groups do collaborative decision making to actually connect with each other and be able to generate interesting ideas and proposals and actually become an organization. So this is sort of very, very raw experimentation. It's super new and it's sort of in the middle, in progress. So I just wanted to give a little bit of insight into what we're doing and what we're learning, because it's definitely very, very hard to say what direction this is going to continue in. But what I can definitely say is that everyone in this group is asking a lot of very fundamental questions, many of which were brought up by the speakers before me, around the role of these kind of organizations and how we actually want to live and what type of behaviors we want to actually encourage and see more of. So if there's anyone also who's interested in joining these early adopters, do let me know, and I'd be happy to onboard you into our group process. And yeah, I think I'd like to leave you with that, and wish I could be there to talk to everyone in the room, but maybe see you next time.
Hey, Francesca, thanks so much. I have to say, I'm sometimes a bit skeptical about Skype talks, but it was such a pleasure to listen to you. Thanks so much. And I'm really looking forward to meeting you next time. And while you have been talking, I have already received requests from the audience that want to get in touch with you. So I think that was lovely. Thanks so much. I've also got another request while I was sitting here from the audience, which shows that we're in the midst of a lively debate. And I want to invite James deMello to join me. He's jumping in spontaneously for 5 minutes. James has been our guest over the past 2 days, and he's from Canada. He's working in the field of medical marijuana. Woo! So this is a sphere that certainly has, I would say, interesting insights in governance, but also regulations. So James, I just want to invite you to quickly jump in. You have 5 minutes and share your thoughts.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Before I start, I just want to say thank you to everybody at RChain. It is amazing. This is my first time in Berlin. It's in Germany, really. So thank you so much, everybody. I'll wait for that to come up. But the cameras aren't on you guys, so you can answer this. Who here smokes pot? Okay, the people in the back, you don't have to be shy. It's totally legal in Canada. If you feel persecuted, please come to Canada. The importance of it, I actually am asking for a reason, because for anybody, feel free to answer this. Where is your pot grown?
In my village.
In your village? Did anybody else want to answer? Where? Yeah. What pesticides are used in what you're consuming?
As far as I know, none, because we know the grower.
Okay.
Very
rare, very rare. You know your grower. 95% of the rest of the market have no idea. Especially, I heard a lot about your parks here. You have no clue. You don't know where it's from, who's growing it, what pesticides are used, heavy metals. Is it from this country? Is it from this continent? We don't know. I'm not going to go into the specifics of supply chain management and blockchain integration, but for us, blockchain seems to be one of the most applicable uses for the regulation of cannabis. In Canada, you have to track every single unit of marijuana that a consumer gets, all the way back to when the seed's first planted. If somebody sneezes in a production room, you need to log that, and you need to track that unit all the way to the end. Pesticides used, heavy metals, microbials, or bacteria, these are all issues that consumers and patients should be worried about. Now in Canada, if our, let's say, annual production. Why do you care? Why is this a problem? If the annual production in Canada right now is 800,000 kilos, that's, let's say, 800 million grams. And depending on how much comes in a package, let's say it's 1 gram, that's 800 million units that need to be tracked for audit compliance, production, lab test results. That's a government regulation in Canada. That will be, or is already, a government regulation here. How are you going to do that in a scalable manner? On every single unit, every single box, anything that you buy on the shelf, when you pick it up, how are you going to know where it's from? You're relying on either something that's on the label, which I don't know what kind of label you'll find on a joint, but sure, a pre-roll. Or you're at the mercy of whoever you're buying it from to tell you that information and just trust what they have to say. But if you have a supply chain that's integrated with blockchain, in a regulated market, you're able to track it from when it's planted all the way up to when a consumer picks it up on a shelf, is able to scan and look up that product information. That's a sort of regulation that the Canadian government wants or wanted, but they kind of failed because they had the regulations in place, but they didn't have a solution. So really what we're doing at Rubicon in particular is we're the third-party validators of that system. We want to regulate the market because what we've learned from Big Pharma is you can't self-regulate. There's no accountability in that space, especially, I won't get into it, but the opioid space. That's why we've seen this in Canada. They want to track every single gram because they've seen what happened with Big Pharma. And it's a controlled substance, and that's what we're going to see across the globe. Canada's already exporting here to Germany. Germany's not quite growing from what I know yet, but I'll take a step back and look at Canada. Why is it a problem for Germans? Why do you care? If I told you that right now, this might have changed in the last few days, there's 132 licenses in Canada to legally grow pot. 132. And it's owned by a handful of companies, actually. Less than that, maybe 40, 50 companies own those 130 licenses. Behind those, there's 2,000 applications to grow, and it takes years to get through the process. The growers, right now, legally, can supply, and again, I'm going to preempt this with, there's a black market, so we don't really know the numbers. It's changing every day. Legal growers in Canada can account for about 10% of the actual demand in Canada. So the other 90% is coming from the black market. And again, what pesticides are used? Where is it grown? We don't really know. Is it black market? We don't know. Now, if we have Canada on top of this, exporting to countries like Germany, Poland, they're working on Malta, but we can't even supply our own country. Do you think your government might be a little worried that it's coming from the black market, just a tiny bit? Or was it produced with EU GMP compliance? Is it safe for people to consume? What sort of reactions are people having to this product? It's a scalability issue, but it's an issue that it's not just about the quantitative, it's about the qualitative stuff, like where is it coming from? Is there provenance? Is there a supply chain tracking where you can actually rely on the data that you have? Overall, Rubicon's ethos is we have to have third-party regulations. And it has to be for profit. Because the government can dictate from the top down what they want to implement or what should be done or what they feel is right. But they don't provide the tools or the resources to actually enforce it or track it. So really, I guess a big tangent, I should have started with who we are and what we're doing, but I hope that explains it. Third-party, for-profit companies starting to regulate spaces, yes, starting with cannabis, pharmaceuticals, chemicals, any controlled substance. That's really what we need. Because right now, it's being done by the same people producing the product. And when you have that, their objectives and their incentives don't align with the consumers that are actually consuming their product. It doesn't align with the government. They will do anything. They'll cut corners. They'll hide any... I don't want to go on this tangent, but I will. An example. There was a company, and I don't, because this is being webcast, I don't want to name names because then they'll sue my company into oblivion. There was a company in 2016 in Canada, $600 million company. They were caught using a cleaning agent called carbutanol. Now, when carbutanol combusts, it releases hydrochlorine gas. that's kind of dangerous for people to inhale. 20 people are hospitalized, 9 months of product recalled. They hid the cleaning agent away to try to save face and avoid the fact from being discovered. So they tried to hide the fact they were using this cleaning agent. And this all happened because somebody left the production door open in the facility. Now, these type of recalls are expensive. They're not deployed fast enough. And people were hospitalized for this. A lot of issues there. If you had an actual tracking or inventory management system where you can take everything in real time, your recalls would only take days. First thing. Second thing, the fact that a $600 million publicly traded company in Canada that is supposedly regulated by the Canadian authorities was found to be using this substance. And they were an organic producer of cannabis. So if this can happen in Canada, it could really happen in Europe. It could really happen anywhere in the world, especially as the global trends are starting to go towards growing in South America, Africa, Eastern European countries, because that's the trends. Saving money on labor, saving money on electricity. So if we can't uphold these own regulations and the standards, this ties back to the governments, I hope. If we can't uphold that in Canada, how are we going to do it for the rest of the world? And that's where we come in. That's really it. That's all I have to say.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you. Thanks, James. Yeah, James, you took the free slot from Joachim. And yeah, thanks for this contribution. It adds a different perspective to the discussion. We are now at the end of our talks, but there's one person that's still left to talk to us, and it's Tim Bansemer. I got to know Tim only a couple of months ago, but I think we've established a kind of interesting, intense work relationship over the past couple of months. Tim is a founder of InBlockio. Tim is also very much involved, or was involved, let's say, it's not clear yet, within RChain. And Tim is one of the people that I know is basically working day and night on the topic of decentralized governance, attending conferences all over the world, traveling around. So I'm really curious for you to wrap it all up. Welcome, Tim.
Thank you. Thank you.
So good evening, everybody. Distributed governance, and you might see already the difference between distributed and decentralized. And this has a meaning. It's all about, I think, the stuff we heard already this evening, and about multiple communities having that effort of rebuilding the way how we organize as a species. And I think it's a transition phase between having these hierarchies, where we currently trust single leaders or small groups of people to decide in an ever-increasing complex world for us and what's best for us. We don't really see that they take all the things in consideration required for a sustainable future. I was working as an RChain European ambassador for RChain, which gave me the great opportunity to work on the necessary technology which we need, like a secure, scalable technology, which gives us the ability to build these new governance models. But on the other hand, gave me the ability to work day and night on distributed governance as well. So I'm thankful for that opportunity, but unfortunate, all contractors of RChain are cancelled. So this means that I'm, as an RChain European ambassador, stopped working for RChain in the mid of November as the ambassador, and also my company, which I created, InBlockio, which is InBlockio Labs and InBlockio Events, and people I was working with are without funding to continue our development work for RChain. But this is all what we see in the blockchain space. The next 2 years will be probably very hard. And we will see what comes out of it. It's a cleaning process. It's also good. So new opportunities come with that as well. So distributed governance is all about the question, how do we govern shared resources without introduction of hierarchies in a permissionless way? And how do we avoid capture? And there's a person called Vlad Zamfir who wrote a very good piece to clarify a little bit the language for the blockchain space, governance 101. It's all about like permissionless blockchains and why do we need to avoid capture. If you think about the internet and you think about one organization or one country controls the internet, this has a lot of negative implications. And you could discuss if there might be too much control of Facebook and Amazon and so on over the current internet infrastructure. And I would say that's currently a case which results into massive control over what people think. And this is probably not, I think, the future I want to see, that big corporations, let's say, control what I think. So I would love to see a world where we have a distributed or decentralized social network, which is public infrastructure, which is community-owned and community-governed. But if we don't know how to do that, we land up in an infrastructure which is owned by a country or own corporation. So we need to get those things right. We need to get the infrastructure, which is the blockchain infrastructure, where we need global permissionless infrastructure, where we can build all the DAOs on. Because if this infrastructure is taken over, well, all the organizations and DAOs and projects which live on this infrastructure will be taken over. It's like a wholesale takeover in a nation state and the dictator comes in. So we need to find ways of preserving those infrastructures to be independent from capturing. So what's the work we do and what's the commitment? It's a commitment to accelerate scalable governance so that we innovate faster. Because we need to innovate very fast. On the one side, to enable scalable permissionless blockchains, which are not captured. On the other hand, because time is running out. We have limited shared resources on this planet. If we don't come up with alternative models, we might kill ourselves before we find a solution. And I believe that we need to combine different technologies, but the most important part is the human part in it. That we need to start changing our behavior, how we interact with each other. Technology will not solve human problems. Human problems can only be solved between us. And that is very important. So I think it's all about building communities. It's all about building a strong community which says we are committed to build new organizational structures. And I believe for that we have some requirements on the value side as well, how we want to build that. I don't know if I know those values, but I know that I live up to some of those values. And I try to build an environment and invite other people and I meet other people that share those values to build communities together to iterate on governance models. And we identified a bunch of stakeholders we want to work closely with, we believe are important for iterating fast on governance models and bring them into the real world. I believe that cities are a great place to innovate on governance models. But I also believe that we see that in DAOs, that we see that in potential bounty systems and other places where we can try out those new technology-based governance models, while the reorganizational structure is also changing. So the culture, how we live together and what we practice, how we make decisions. So I'm very thankful for also the people from Inspiral and Rework and Polka Lab, which are those practitioners which I, for me personally, discovered only like half a year ago. And had the chance to work with, and I'm very inspired by how this can help us to build those new organizations we need and how we can take those practices into decision-making processes in a digital world. So the last two things for me to finish up on, actually a picture is missing here. There is a governance workshop where I want to invite for in January, where we bring all those stakeholders together here in Berlin, a small group of a maximum of 60 people, to work 2 days intensively to develop a shared language and to push forward that we actually find tangible proof of concepts where we can accelerate the innovation in that space. Furthermore, we love to see a get-together in Athens, hopefully in June next year. But this will all depend if the community is ready for it and we find the support which is required to do that. But it's about starting a global movement towards, yes, we want to build human-centric governance models, and yes, we are aware of that this is a super complex problem to solve, and potentially it will take like more than a decade to be solved. But that's okay. That's the path we take. So thanks for your attention, and thanks for all those people which are contributing towards that goal.
Thanks so much, Tim. And I'm really glad that you finished with this outlook, because I actually would really like to see this conference happening, I have to say. And probably there are people in this room, but also many others that would be able to help with that, to bring it together and to support it. Yeah, Anna is raising her arm already. Yeah, let's do it. I know, because I think it's absolutely important. We should take that discussion and put it on a far bigger scale. And I also appreciate that you came up with, identifying the stakeholders with whom you would like to collaborate, or with whom we should all collaborate in the near future. Because I sense, that's at least my learning from the previous years, we've all been very much enclosed in our own projects, and now is the time where we should reach out and look at what's going on and try to find ways to collaborate. So I want to thank all of you for your fantastic contributions. I found it extremely inspiring. I know that you might have lots of questions. There's still lots of stuff to discuss. I was thinking it might be probably the best way if each of you helps a little bit to reorganize the space in such a way that we can shape little islands of chairs where people can sit together, share a beer, or not share a beer, but have a beer. There is no need to share one, unless you insist on it. And I would just encourage everyone, find the people whom you want to talk to, make sure to ask your questions, because that's probably much more productive than if we, I was first thinking, okay, let's maybe create 3 breakout sessions per 3 different topics, but my feeling is, no, we can do this in a self-emerging way. I just want to ask your help with, just organizing chairs a little bit, that it's more communicative. But I trust we get there. And before we do that, before we break into this more social part of the evening, let me just do this quick announcement that at 9 p.m. we will build a little corner over there in the room where those of you that would like to chat or to talk with Greg Meredith and also Steve Ross-Talbot, we have a Zoom call scheduled with them. So those of you that would like to ask any questions about the state of the co-op, about row length, the row calculus, all the stuff you didn't understand about the technology behind RChain yet, or anything else, you can ask these questions and they will be here. And I'll let you know when we are approaching 9 p.m. Thanks so much and enjoy the rest of the evening.